So we just wrapped up our webinar on sustainable thinking and what the climate agenda means for BD and marketing professionals. It's a great session, but we didn't have time to answer all of your questions. So we've recorded some bonus content for you. So I'm going to dive into some of the questions we didn't get to answer. So first of all, panel, what are the challenges of engaging partners and how can you crack it? So how can you mobilize partners to support what is such an important agenda? And again, I think I'll come to you, Justine, first.
Wow, yeah, another massive question. Okay, let me think on that. Okay, so right, I'm a marketing campaigns person, and so anybody in my field will know that the word engagement is always key. So how do you engage anybody? You have to make it relevant to them, right? So I think it comes down to a good mix of education, awareness, but also that you have to have a lot of EQ. I think you have to really understand what are the barriers to success. And I can speak to this quite honestly in that, you know, not everybody was on board with this. Yes, we had some fantastic data. Yes, we had some fantastic research outputs. The clients give us great insight. You would think all of that was enough to get everybody really on board, no question asked. Oh, that's not the case. And it's not the case because everybody's busy and everybody's busy in different areas. So if this is not something that, you know, lawyer A's client is working on, and they're right in the weeds of a very complex matter, why are they going to switch on to this when they've got a million and one other things to think about? So breaking through, that's really tricky. But I think there's another element to it. It's not just about making the matter engaging or making it important. There's something else at play here that really struck me. And I know from previous conversation with Ripan, she agreed with me on this, that lawyers are specialists, and this is not a specialist subject. And so there is actually a lot of fear at play. Any of us who are, you know, experts, we've all built up our experience over many, many years. Throw something in, like your questions, Matthew, where you think, oh, hang on a minute, I'm not sure about this. There's that fight or flight, isn't it? That fear of like, oh, do I just bury my head and ignore this? Or do I jump in with both feet and I want to know more and I want to learn and I want to upskill and be on board with it? So you're never going to hit everybody all of the time. And I think you have to work around that. You know, you have to find ways that make sense at the salient points where those people need it. You know, we did have a massive amount of support, and I'm not saying that we had a whole load of people who were ignoring it, but you're always going to have naysayers. And you're always going to have those people who take that little bit longer. You know, they need to think on something, or they need to think, oh, now it's relevant. I mean, one of the findings in our research, right, that Claire alluded to at the outset of the webinar was that, you know, forget energy and transport, who are all, you know, they're in this, they've been in this for years, but real estate and health came through as really strong sectors who were in real danger of having their funding cut off. And it's a bit of an eye-opener. Now, if you work in that area, client or legal advisor side, it's like, why? You know? So there's an element of, oh, do I have to panic and jump straight in? No, but what you do have to do is make sure it's actually on your agenda. So hitting them where it hurts works, but we're not all about negativity and, you know, pain to net gain. There absolutely are opportunities, and it's shaping that. It's shaping the opportunity there. It's not about the stick, actually. It is about the carrot, but it's not a one size fits all, which I think we've touched on throughout this discussion.
Yeah.
Right. Would anyone else like to add anything to that?
I mean, I think you know, I completely agree with that. You know, the fact that this is an important topic to our clients, that it's mainstream news, is helpful. but that doesn't necessarily mean that every partner is going to be on board. And even when they are on board, they may not actually understand what it is where that niche is, where that green space actually is. So I think in many respects, the challenges of getting this, getting partners to support this agenda are not that different to any marketing discussion that we might be having with partners. If marketing and BD can go to their partners and demonstrate that they understand what's going on, they're ahead of the curve, they are coming up with well-considered talking points, that we are finding some of those niche areas ourselves. I mean, obviously that's a big ask, but I think if you are really going to be able to add value to your to the teams that you're working with, then I think it is incumbent on us to make sure that we understand what's going on in the market and that we can go to partners with something useful to say. And so, of course, that means BD and marketing getting to grips with the ESG agenda, keeping up to date with developments, and certainly, there will be people, subject matter experts within organisations. Certainly, I find it very helpful to talk these sorts of issues through with our global sustainability lead. I mean, that's maybe the head of CSR or whatever the programme is being called, but people who are alive to the detail of what's going on and can help to guide conversations. I think that partners do value that, particularly as this is such a broad topic.
I was just going to say that what Ripan had said earlier was about bringing in the specialists, and I think that's great. When somebody doesn't want to feel alone or exposed, they want to feel empowered and supported, and that kind of buddying up and sharing. It's a great leveler, actually, and it breaks down the silos that often happen in professional services where you have got specialist areas. It does force people, I think, to come together and show an element of vulnerability. I don't understand that. Can you explain it to me? Somebody will, or you'll find a solution together.
I completely agree with the point that you were making, actually, that this is a different kind of conversation. So, like as Ripan says, all of the usual techniques you use to engage partners, they are all really effective, especially having a business champion to lead something through the business and show them that it's about the whole business. It's not just a marketing initiative. But what's different about sustainability is the quality of this conversation. So cutting through silos. So we had fantastic conversations with Adil Goddard, with a specialist lawyer and a lawyer who is more attuned to the sustainability agenda and the client, and the quality of conversations we were having about the agenda and that vulnerability of the fact that nobody had all the answers leads to a very different kind of conversation. And I think that's what's particularly engaging for partners, is that if they make that leap and open up their contacts to more expert sustainability people in the organisation, you start the conversation which discovers that actually sustainability isn't a strand of their business. It affects absolutely every aspect of that client's business and their operating model and their future. And suddenly you start seeing just how big this agenda and this transformation agenda really is. And I think once you have partners in other sectors and practice areas really engaged, they start to realise it's a very different kind of conversation. As you said, it's about problem solving together. It's about how do we get there quicker together, and being quite vulnerable and not having all the answers. I think it opens up new opportunities to really deepen relationships. So I think that's why this agenda is particularly special, because it is collaborative, which is really exciting. And I think maybe just having each partner engage in one or two conversations, I think will really help open up people to engage in the campaigns.
Great thoughts and advice. So moving on to sort of the next question that we've had in from our attendees. Someone asked, how would you define ESG, and what's the difference between ESG and CSR? Who would like to have a go at tackling this one?
Wow, that's a big question.
shall
Yeah, you go for it if you want to.
Well, I have a go. Just in terms of the way I see it. This is I mean, this is the way how I've viewed the whole corporate social responsibility agenda in relation to what we're now talking about, this whole ESG agenda. And for me, it's you know, we've been talking about the role of business in society for a very long time, certainly since Milton Friedman's point of view back in the 70s, where he talked about the role of business. The social responsibility of business is to increase profits. So there's been all sorts of debate and discussion over the last 50 years about the role of business in society. And sort of out of these discussions, corporate social responsibility emerged, which was very much about a business being responsible for various, you know, their decisions impact a range of different stakeholders beyond shareholders. So it's not just about profitability and shareholders, that there's a whole range of different stakeholders in society that are impacted by business. So employees, communities, customers, suppliers, and so on. And so, you know, corporate social responsibility, you know, businesses are accountable to a much broader array of stakeholder groups today than perhaps how they were viewed some decades ago. And but that's really for me, that's very much a sort of a contextual piece, you know, a contextual accountability agenda, corporate social responsibility. And it kind of, for me, sometimes felt a little bit at the fringes of business. It wasn't sort of a core part of an organization's business strategy. It wasn't really what was driving that business, but it's something that they sort of touched on the fringes. But the whole ESG agenda, however, for me, is something that, and again, this really has sort of borne out of the whole impact investing agenda, where businesses need some way of measuring the impact of organizations in society today in order to know which ones to obviously invest in. And the whole sort of ESG metrics sort of stem from that. And for me, that's a much more quantitative measure of the sustain. So it's grounding. So it's in a way, sort of sustainability has gone from the back in the day, sort of a philanthropic charity donating or working with, to CSR, to ESG, which is very much at the heart of business strategy. You know, what is a business's impact on its different stakeholder groups, and how do we measure that? How do they treat their employees? How diverse and inclusive are they? To what extent do they reflect the societies in which they operate? You know, how do they treat their suppliers? You know, how are they tackling climate change? You know, there's a whole, it's a very sort of metric, measurement oriented piece, which is about how a business is driving itself forward. It's core, front and center to the purpose of an organization today and to its direction and strategy. So that's how I see one. CSR is very much about the sort of more of a qualitative contextual piece around an organization's social responsibility. ESG is very much about hard metrics and tangible actions of business, and it's central to their strategy.
I agree. I think it is a great way to express it, and actually completely agree with the view that sort of CSR has sort of sometimes been looked upon as a bit of a peripheral activity. And Claire, I think you mentioned it earlier as, you know, a separate strand, and you know, the ESG, the elevation of the ESG agenda, I think, is a game changer, and it certainly is forcing leadership to view it as part and parcel of the business itself, and you know, what does that mean to us in terms of purpose and vision and values and culture and employee engagement and client development and all of it. So you know, if it has really wrapped into a wider and much more far-reaching discussion around what it means to be a responsible business.
I agree. I think really ESG speaks to the organisation's very reason for being, whereas, as Ali said, CSR is at best it's slightly peripheral and philanthropic. At worst, it's almost like an offset policy or a papal indulgence for something terrible that you're doing in the world elsewhere. So I think really those days are over, and ESG speaks to the very core of why organisations exist. And I think what's amazing about this whole ESG agenda is that, you know, climate change is an issue is far too big for governments to solve alone. Actually, it's going to come down to business and finance to really solve it. And I think that in order to do that, we've got to make it profitable. There's got to be a new way of creating value. That's the only way we're going to get the impetus and the investment for enough change quickly enough. So a new definition of what value is, as you said, speaking to culture and our very reason of being, but also we need to make it profitable in some way. So I think that ESG is a huge opportunity, and that's going to demand, you know, some organisations are looking at mitigating their impact, some organisations are looking at improving it, but really that's not going to work. This is about a total transformation of everybody's business so that we can all get there faster. And I think that's really exciting, but it's definitely not CSR. CSRs are, you know, less than 5% of your business. This is 100% of your business, and will need leadership and change and investment to get there. So it's enormous. Very exciting. And I think we as marketers have an opportunity to use people's marketing budget to make change. You know, we, in terms of our lives and our core purposes, we can divert people's marketing budgets into creating information and insight that can make change happen, which is really exciting for all of us, because we can help those organisations grow and do better by doing good, which is really exciting and motivating, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, fantastic answers, ladies, and I'm not going to even attempt to try and provide something different to that, because I think you've covered every base, but in a very kind of probably very simplistic way. For me, it's that elevation of CSR. CSR, as you say, was seen as like a softer, nice to have, we should look like we've got it, you know, a bit of investment, a bit of a budget put to one side. In my view, it's almost the CSR has taken the place of the S and the ESG, and then to have that equality of vision and it's embedded as part of the strategic DNA of a business, that it is no longer an offshoot. CSR is almost the foundation work for the S of ESG. And if you haven't looked at that, then you're massively behind the curve. And I don't know that there are many businesses, serious businesses, who have, but it's making everybody look at this on an equal level. You can't ignore, and that's what I love about the three sitting very equally. You cannot ignore one over the other, or prioritize one over the other, because you'll get found out. And you may have gaps, you may have, you know, longer journeys, or, you know, more areas that you need to build on, but you cannot ignore one over the other. And I think this is where businesses were able to hide a little bit behind CSR. It was a bit tick box exercise, whereas there are so many demands on businesses, whether it's from a recruitment perspective, whether it's from a customer perspective. I love the, you know, as we were working through the project with Man Bites Dog, there was the 3 Ps came across for ESG, planet, people and profit. And that has resonated with me, because it's actually easier for me to understand. Because I think one of the massive hurdles, and a lot of our clients, you know, who were specialists in these areas, said exactly the same. The terminology used is so confusing. Say ESG to somebody who doesn't use the term ESG, they use the term sustainability, use the term CSR, all of this is so complex that it doesn't need to be. It's allowing you to kind of cut through that. And if you do nothing else but focus on those 3 pillars across your business, you'll be on the right track.
And I think you're right, there are 3 pillars. It's systemic, and the S is going to become much more important. It's just that right now we've got this very strong ticking climate clock and the threat of a lost decade. So we need to move, but obviously all of those things need attention, and I think S is going to be coming up rapidly behind the E in the next few years. Sorry, Ripan, you go.
No, I was going to say the 3 pillars certainly resonate with me. We have 3. We replace profit with practices, but it comes to the same thing. And I think that, you know, certainly being able to distill it in that way just makes it you know, easier for people to understand. It's not, I don't think it's gimmicky at all. I think that actually finding ways to distill what we actually mean by it can only be helpful.
Great. Again, some brilliant answers there. So yeah, coming on to our next question from our attendees. Do you think certifications, so for example, B Corp, can play a role in accelerating sustainability? And, you know, I guess if so, what is or should be their role?
I'm happy to start, and then you go, Ripan, go on.
Yeah, that's a huge question.
So I think common standards is you know, if you look at what's stopping us get to net zero, the number one thing is finance. The number two thing is common standards. So if we don't know where we are today, how do we measure where we are tomorrow, and how do we show substantial change? So I think there's a huge demand across all industries for common industry specific standards and comparable standards across industries that will help us benchmark where we are, measure and report on it, and invest to get better, and then show the value we've created by doing it. So I think certifications and standards are absolutely essential, and I think they will vary by sector based on a number of, you know, factors of what's valuable to particular people in a particular sector. But I think having those agreed common standards is absolutely vital, and at the moment we almost have too many, and what we need is a consensus so that we can compare apples and apples and see really where we are and where we're going. And I think people open sourcing standards and their approach to them is also really important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we do seem to have too many. And the other point I would sort of say is that some of them seem a lot easier to obtain than others. So, you know, if an accreditation, I think they are valuable, and I think we do need to have them, because as you rightly say, Claire, how will we know, how will we measure that success if we don't know where we are now, or we don't have an agreed standard? And I think that is something that you know, is something that is being grappled with in many different ways. I think there is a risk that if the accreditation is too easy to obtain, or an organisation has signed up to lots of pledges, it can almost come back to bite you and actually feel a bit hollow, particularly if that organisation isn't then backing them up in the way that they actually conduct their own business. So yeah, I think we certainly need them, but the challenge is deciphering which ones are worth having.
Yeah, and the easiest thing to do to get to net zero for companies in a lot of ways is just to mandate a net zero supply chain. But if there aren't common standards they can use to see where their suppliers are at and help their suppliers get those kind of accreditations, then it's very hard for them to do that. So I think having a mandate, you know, having standards, not just for sustainability, but also perhaps for supply chain diversity and some of these other positive social impact areas would be really helpful. I think they are valuable, but they're only as valuable as the quality of the standard and the level of understanding of that standard. So I think we need more consensus, fewer standards.
Also, I think it's that they're good, they're helpful in the sense that you know, at an individual organisation level, you can judge, you know, how, you know, where you fall short or where you're ahead of where you should be, and obviously, you know, those that can be more ahead of a standard, even better. But I think it's just really helpful at an individual level to gauge progress. But also at an aggregate level, I think it's important to be able to see, because this is a collective effort, because this is something that we're all having to do as, you know, not just at an organizational level, but at a market level, at a global level, you know, you can just start to get a sense of what the data is therefore telling you at a more aggregate level. So I think it's quite helpful from that perspective as well.
And the best standards, they're not a certificate, they're kind of a year-on-year progress tracker where you measure yourself and they help you with all the aspects of change that you need to go through. So I think that they're not kind of like your grade 4, I don't know, tap and ballet or something that you stick on the wall and forget about. They are like something that is a living part of your business that changes what you do on an ongoing basis. So I think they can be very useful to get the team behind the change and communicate with your team as well as with your clients.
I think they do accelerate sustainability, if that's right for that business, which I think is what we're kind of all saying. If it works for you and it gives you that framework to work within, then that's great. What I find interesting is that B Corp in particular, it feels a bit trendy right now. And so as a marketer, is it a marketing badge of honor that businesses feel that they need to have to then be chosen? It was a bit like sustainable fashion and, you know, all those lines, putting something, you know, it's like the old gluten-free, isn't it? If you badge it and use it in your marketing, then you're making the buyer choose you more easily. And I think it will be something that is leveraged a lot in businesses marketing. However, the good side of it is obviously Scope 3 is the next kind of focus for a lot of business, and we're looking at that. And within your supply chain, if you have B Corp suppliers, it does, you know, extra marks or whatever it is. You know, I'm not the expert in how that's graded, but it does benefit the supply chain. So I think it's good, but I completely agree with my fellow panelists. And this is something that came out through all of our discussions with our clients and our own panel discussions and our research, that the confusion across the frameworks is often the barrier. And if I'm being truthful, I think finding the answer to that is like, it's nirvana. You know, it's probably unlikely to happen because there is so much complexity and so much differentiation between different sectors. And so there, if you go down that rabbit hole of trying to find the right accreditation or the right framework or the right fit, you've missed opportunities that you could have done to move yourself along that journey to net zero or to your other sustainable targets. So it's a really tricky one. I don't think it's a bad thing to look for those, but just, I think, don't become fixated around them and don't feel that you've got to tick another box. It comes back to everything we said in the beginning. It's got to be authentic and genuine for your business.
Excellent. And moving on to the next question, given how busy life is in professional services, how do you elevate climate change to become a priority for colleagues and clients? I think probably you've at least partially answered this one with some of the discussion around engaging partners and driving change, but is there anything else that you'd like to add around this, anybody?
I think I might as well kick this off. You do a fabulous campaign with some proprietary research that really kicks people where it hurts and tells them they better act now. I think that's how you go about it, isn't it, Claire? You know, joking aside, to have a message come out of our research that said, you know, your funding could legitimately be cut off in 4 years is pretty damning. And so it absolutely pushes it up the top of the agenda for those discussions. And as I said earlier, you know, any campaign that has something that's a little bit negative, a little bit scary, it creates impact, right? But this isn't about scaremongering. It's about making sure that the conversation is being had. So, you know, for us, no matter what the output was from that research, we knew that there would be valuable content that act as a door opener. And we all want to be able to talk to, you know, we're all together on this because we can talk about this. 6, 12, 18 months ago, if you knocked on my door, I wouldn't have been as knowledgeable or as entrenched in this. And so it depends on where you're at. I think in your career, in your world, and the work you do, your own personal want. You know, Ali started out talking about us as people, that we do care. Some people aren't quite on this agenda as others. If you're in that world, it's like, it's either get on the bus or just don't, you know. So I think that having something that's impactful and it stands out, you know, that's what we're about, doing something a little bit different, but the message is still the same, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I think making it part of the culture of the firm is, is central to making it a priority. If it's a priority for the business, it's certainly a priority for people within the business. So, creating engagement and enjoying activities together that demonstrate those wider positive benefits. They bond colleagues. Why not have some fun in the process? It's not all, about sort of doom and gloom. And where there are leaders, leadership boards that are still not convinced. I think the reality is that businesses are already having to report on climate change responsibility. So there isn't really a choice. These considerations do need to be incorporated into business strategy. Otherwise, businesses won't actually be in line with regulations that they need to be in line with. So in some ways there's no choice, but I think demonstrating the materiality of this issue to those that still need it demonstrated to them is probably it's probably a good place to start as well. But yeah, I mean it has the capacity to engage everybody, and that I think is certainly certainly very compelling.
And so actually, are we saying that we're making it a priority, or are we saying we want it to be part of the culture? We want it to be part of business as usual. And I love this, I read this the other day, that it's the little things, isn't it? So our used coffee grinds get given to staff from the cafe to go and use as fertilizer. That's a teeny tiny step, but it's part of our commitment, because anybody could do that. Yeah, I'll have some ground coffee, thanks, and I'll pop it in my garden. It doesn't always have to be big. I think if you say it's a priority, sometimes people go, oh, can you sustain that level? Whereas if as you say, Ripan, it's the little things, it's part of your culture, then you're not thinking about it, it just becomes natural.
Yeah, I agree.
Finding your supporters as well, isn't it? I think there will be huge supporters within your workforce. Where do you find them? We've seen some really interesting reports in the last week or so about climate anxiety amongst young people and how much they care about it and how much they want to advocate. So actually all good stakeholder management starts with finding your supporters and then how they can be internal activists. But actually a lot of our research shows that people of all ages and business leaders, middle managers, everybody feels this. So I think it's a really good way of engaging people on an emotional level, but it has to be through and through the firm. Otherwise people will feel quite cynical about it, rightfully so. So I think it does present a huge opportunity for engaging your teams with your purpose.
Right, and final question for the panel, and then you can breathe. What is the most trending climate change and sustainability trend nowadays in corporate life? What do we think?
I think it's still decarbonisation. I think getting to net zero. There is a growing recognition of the importance of biodiversity. I think the planting new trees. It's not always the right answer. It hasn't always been the right answer. Carbon offsetting market has grown very quickly, and there may be some inefficiencies in that. And as Claire was saying earlier, I think setting targets and looking at progress year on year is certainly probably the better way to go, rather than sort of trying to approach it all that differently. I think definitely the wider social and governance elements of sustainability are becoming much more important. We talked about that earlier, convergence and also the conflict that they can bring. I think there's also a conversation that's starting about the responsibility of business to help manage the environmental impact with so many people working from home. So although there's going to be less of an impact from commuting, suddenly people are not working in energy efficient offices, they might need some guidance. It might be more difficult, and this goes to the hybrid working discussion of engaging people. How do you maintain that culture? So if you are trying to build a culture of sustainability within your organisation, that half your people are, in a different location half of the time, how do you really get them to buy into that way of working, of living as well? So so I think there's still the fundamental point about decarbonisation, net zero, but then lots of other things converging with that discussion as well.
Yeah, I would agree. It's the question's almost in two parts, isn't it? The climate change trend and then sustainability trend. And going back to the point, we all merge these reference points and terminology, and it becomes around semantics. I don't think we can sit here as a group and say, well, what's the trend? Because actually it will depend on your sector. But I think Ripan's right. Net zero obviously is front and centre still. The targets that people have to meet. So therefore you've got your hydrogen emergence and a real push to have hydrogen powered homes, electrification of transport, etc. But I do think, and we did touch on this earlier, I think the emergence of the S and the G is what's going to be actually really exciting. Not that net zero isn't exciting, but it's almost that's understood. I think it's kind of accepted. We're already on that. Most of us are already on that journey. I think the opportunities lie within the S and the G emergence, and as Claire articulated earlier very adeptly, that conflict between the three. That's a real one to watch, I think. Just as we lose Claire.
That's probably a sign that this is a wrap. Was there any sort of final points that anyone else wanted to make around that final question?
No, I agree with the decarbonisation agenda on the climate change side. I think on the sustainability side, the much broader agenda, I think the issues of diversity and inclusion have obviously, it's something that continues, but it's still something that needs a lot of work and needs to be top of the agenda or at the top of the agenda. And of course, the whole mental health aspect as well of sustainable business is something that's come more strongly to the fore in the context of the pandemic, and something that Claire mentioned earlier about climate change anxiety, a whole range of different anxieties that people are experiencing and that organisations are becoming a little bit more responsive to.
I'd love to add in terms of, what's really trending at the moment, really COP26 has provided such a groundswell of activity. It's provided a deadline, it's provided a milestone and a focus. And my great concern is that if we don't get all the agreements that we need around COP26, what happens next? Because we need the next milestone. The next big milestone is 2030. We already know that we risk a lost decade. What we need to do as businesses is make sure that we keep this agenda alive and that we keep action and we keep movement around it. Because if we don't capitalise on the momentum of COP26 and if we don't have anything to sustain it afterwards, I think that's a real danger in terms of creating change and keeping this agenda alive. And I think many businesses that have been really championing this agenda might move on to the next topic. But as I said in the talk, this is not a hot topic. It's about fundamental change. And I think all of us as marketers need to guide our businesses to really continue to keep this agenda alive and keep fighting the fight for climate change, really.
Amazing. Well, that's a wrap. And yeah, thank you for all the questions from the attendees. Some really tough questions there, brilliantly dealt with on the spot by our panels. So thank you again so much to our panels. Lots of takeaways, lots of brilliant insights. So I hope everyone enjoys the bonus content and stay tuned for our next event in the coming months.